In this episode, we will talk with artist Khari Johnson-Ricks.
This is The Hidden Critique, where we discuss art, race, and higher education at the intersection of an MFA. I'm Marlon Tobias, pronouns he, him.
And I'm Krystle Lemonias, pronouns she, her.
Welcome to our show.
All right, so excited about this episode. We are bringing on actual working living artists by the name of Khari. The reason why we decided to do this is for a couple reasons. One is to shout out those working artists that are out here today, grinding it out, making themselves known and making their creative dreams come true, but also to give a voice to those artists and give a real-time, modern-day, contemporary perspective of what it means to be a working artist out here in these hustle streets. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about Khari.
Khari Johnson-Ricks is a draftsperson and mover based on the East Coast. He is concerned with poetry and the somatic self. His work looks like works on paper, independent publishing, public art, and Black vernacular dance. He has exhibited at Night Gallery, Center for Art, Research and Alliances, and Delhi Gallery, among a host of other spaces. His work can be found in the Met Library and on the internet. Welcome, Khari.
Yes, welcome, Khari. Thank you for joining us and talking with us about your artistic journey and just overall what it means to be a creative in the 21st century. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited to talk with you guys.
Definitely excited to get into it with you, but because mental health is important in life, especially when you're living that artist and entrepreneur lifestyle, we want to know, Khari, how is your heart?
My heart is good, very relaxed for the first time in a while. So I'm just reveling in that fact and taking it easy.
I love that.
I love that. I love that. How about you, Chris? How is your heart?
My heart is, I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety today. I don't know what it is.
Talk about it.
It's been a busy week, and I know I have another busy week ahead, and so I'm kind of trying to enjoy a little weekend fun at home, but trying to come down off the high of the week that just ended.
That's when you know you're settled into adulthood, when you find fun at home.
I tell you.
Right? You start to appreciate the value of time spent in your house, in your bed, watching your TV.
Yes,
eating
the best,
your food
the best time
in your
ever.
refrigerator. Yes.
Literally, yeah.
And how's your heart, Marlon?
My heart is right now in a stable, peaceful place right now. This has been a really hectic week for me. We're actually recording at the end of the week, and I feel like I've just been running. So right now I feel like I'm in a place where I can kind of breathe and take in what all I've done and reset for the next week or the next round of events that I have coming up.
That sounds good.
All right, Khari. So I would love for you to start from the beginning of your artist journey, right? So culturally, given the cultural and economic hurdles in this profession and in as well as also being a person of color, a Black person, there's this notion or narrative that oftentimes we are faced with by our parents or by our elders, that being an artist or being a creative isn't sustainable, right? So for you, how did you navigate to pursue your degree and your passions in art? How did you work through that notion or narrative, or was that even a part of your journey?
I think that getting that question right now is really interesting because it's been a real question in my life, like sustainability and how it is I can make a real business from my artist practice, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm still figuring that out. I think that right now that looks like having a job that will give me a base level of money while I, make a new body of work. In the past, that's looked like having a specific kind of relationship with a gallery where they would give me like a production budget, like before a project gets done or exhibited. That's been a way to have income and to have money when things haven't sold yet. But ultimately, it kind of comes down to like understanding like what kind of agreements I'm willing and able to make, and like what deals I can make with different people and like other businesses, and knowing that I have control over those relationships. And yeah, I guess
Nice.
that's my answer to that.
So, what did support look like for you in the beginning, right? So, when you made the decision that I'm going to pursue art as a profession, and I'm going to pursue art in my higher education, what did support look like for you in regards to your family's response or your friends' response?
Um, well, I think so. Initially, I went to school for animation, so it wasn't really a question of support. Like, I think people understand that, when you do a major like animation, that there are jobs and internships and blah blah blah. So my parents weren't really concerned. They weren't really like questioning my decision to pursue that specifically. The sort of raised eyebrows came when I didn't animate. Like when I got the degree and then decided not to be an
Yeah.
animator. Yeah, that's when people were like, "Okay, so what are you doing?" and like, "Why?" And yeah, so and then I had to like actually come up with a way to support myself and to pursue what I think is now what my career is, which is like, several pillars, like including publishing, public art, and like painting and drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, like from like deciding that that might be the route that I want to pursue, making connections with people and trying to find jobs and trying to find projects that would allow me to show and prove that I have the ability to make high quality projects in that space,
Mm-hmm.
and projects that are, concerned with and related to like the communities and the interests that I have personally, you know?
Yeah.
So initially, I think the first project that my parents saw, my family saw that, solidified for them that I was going to do this professionally it was like the McCarter Highway mural project that
Mm-hmm.
folks like Lenny Carrera, Laqua Nuna Yara, and Rebecca Jampol, who they co-curated that wall project, the mural project. They curated me into that. I did a mural on McCarter Highway, and that was like the first. That was like my first major project where
Mm-hmm.
like it's permanent, it's still there, it's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. So once I did that, then kind of the ups and downs were legitimized for my family. Like
Mm.
they're like, okay, like regardless of whether or not you're quote unquote successful at this particular moment, we know that this is something that you're taking seriously.
Mm-hmm. And for those that don't know, McCarter Highway is the McCarter Highway in Newark, New Jersey. Khari is really connected to that community. And so I'm
Yeah, shout out
curious
Newark.
now. Yeah, shout out Newark. Yes,
Shout out North New
absolutely.
Jersey.
Yeah. How did you then come to make some of the work that you have been doing on paper for the past couple years? I know that's a big part of your practice.
So I think there's two sort of answers. So one answer is that I was asked to be a part of this mentorship program
Mm-hmm.
for high school students in Newark through City Without Walls, which used to be a
Mm-hmm.
gallery, like a community-based gallery in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
While I was doing that, I ran into this kid named Jackson. He was having trouble, drawing small, like
Mm-hmm.
drawing figures proportionally on small sheets of paper. So I just like I just gave him a sheet of paper and we just started adding sheets of paper, just like letting him draw off the paper. And from there, we like learned together how to make figures in a proportional way, but also figured out that you can make like temporary murals through the act of like drawing and painting on paper, which was like a breakthrough for me because I had been
Mm.
wanting to make murals, but I haven't, you know, it's really difficult to just spontaneously make a mural. You have to go through a lot of like bureaucracy and like back and forth with like city administrators or curators, whoever is in control of the walls that you're going to be painting on.
Mm-hmm.
um you have to do a lot of that back and forth, designing, redesigning, editing, getting approvals, blah blah blah. Whereas like if I made you know quote unquote murals on paper and like in the house, then I could have a body of examples of like what a mural might look like, and also practice my craft in the mural making space.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how my work ended up looking the way that it does. What I
Mm.
underestimated is people's resistance to the those works as
Really?
murals instead of people wanting, yeah, like there's a lot of resistance initially to the idea that they would be murals. Instead, people kind of like just assume they were like large scale watercolors, and then like galleries and stuff wanted to exhibit them in that
Mm.
way, which kind of
Mm-hmm.
like made the work become what it is now, I guess, within the market. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I think what's confusing and has been a confusing part is that like people want to frame them and blah blah blah, and it's like no, they're actually murals. Like really, the way that I would want them to exist is for someone to like glue it to their wall and for them to live with it
Oh.
forever.
Interesting. Hmm.
Um, but like there hasn't been an opportunity really for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
People want to people want to like move it around and shit. So
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah.
That's always is something else when you have this vision for the work and then people's interaction with it and their assumptions around it intrudes what you have planned for it and their engagement with it. So that's really fascinating.
That's a long
Right.
answer, but that's what's been going on.
Yeah.
Definitely. And so, but your practice is also multidisciplinary. You're not only a two-dimensional artist, but you're also a performative artist too. Your bio says that uses the term Black vernacular dance. So, could you speak more to that and what encompasses Black vernacular dance?
Well, I use Black vernacular dance to as a catch-all term for dances that happen inside the club and on the street. So, popping,
Mm.
locking, breakdancing, street dances, house dance, whacking, voguing. These are club dances.
Mm-hmm.
All of them at the intersection of, Black American music and diasporic music's influence in America, within the context mostly of the East Coast and the West Coast. Not to, deny the existence or to obfuscate from, dance styles that have happened in the South and in the Midwest, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not I'm not that familiar with them. I don't practice them myself. Those dances include like juking, footwork. Like when I say juke, I mean like like Memphis juke,
Mm-hmm.
footwork like Chicago footwork. then there's like the majorette dance
Yeah.
style. There's all these dances that come from like historically Black colleges, stepping, those kinds of
Yeah.
things. Yeah. So when I say Black vernacular dance, that's kind of what I mean. And for me, they're kind of like the architecture of like my aesthetic and the the poetic and emotional architecture of my work, like
Mhm.
how I use energy, like how I use the energy from those dances is I think about like, you know, the specific context that those dances might have come from, and like them as a reaction to what has happened in in the communities where those dances were made,
Mhm.
and try to think about like the poetic nature of that. So like, like you don't get Jersey Club dancing without, the Newark riots and a certain kind of neglect after that from the wider mainstream business world, you know?
Mhm.
In the
Yeah.
closing of clubs in Newark and the policing of club culture in Newark after the riots.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, like what does that mean, and how does that, how do the people in a community react to that? And there's several steps from Chicago House through Baltimore Club to Jersey Club that happen. And all of those places deal with similar kinds of interactions with like the state and police,
Hmm.
right? So they become like an epigenetic marker of those experiences, like through the generations, you know?
Mhm.
They become an echo of their context, which is something I think is really powerful. And so I can move out from there into like more playful spaces, or I can reference those dances specifically, or I can do those dances, or I can record, you know, sounds and poetry and audio, like, interviews, blah blah blah, anything that I'm thinking about at the time
Mhm.
from that like aesthetic ethos.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. It sounds like you're grabbing when we're talking about Black vernacular dance, right? You're acknowledging that even regionally within the United States, that Black people are not a monolith, and there are these very specific nuances that these different regional groups of Black people have adopted or expanded upon. And what you're doing is you're really giving acknowledgement and celebration to those different dynamics of what it means to be Black and we've how we've adapted and how we've really further creative in these different interesting ways in these different places, which I think is so cool, especially coming for I find relation to that because for me in particular, I am of Jamaican descent on my dad's side. I'm of American descent on my mom's side, but my mom, her family is based in the South, right? So she had that Southern rearing, but she was raised in New York. So I grew up seeing these different flavors and these different nuances of Blackness. So I love hearing how, as artists, how we translate that in our work. So I love the fact that you've taken our dance and our different forms of dance and highlighted them in so many different colorful ways in your work.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, and like I can't say that like all of my work is pictures of the dances, but it is the aesthetic. Like I think about like movement, energy, and like how the music feels. Oftentimes, it's kind of like where I start from, and then I can move into other narratives and other situations and offer like my own, you know, manifestations of what I think might be possible as like
Mhm.
healing or things I want to offer people like as options for how to live, it becomes like just like a jumping off point for sure. But I think for me personally, it's very important that I like know and study these dances
Mm-hmm.
because they are the way that, the people from where I'm from have historically sublimated from the harms of the state and of capitalism. And it's actually feels really fruitful for me
Mm-hmm.
as like as a personal pursuit, not just even as an artistic one.
Yeah, I know just following your Instagram and what you post there, like dance and movement is such a big part of your just daily self-care and enjoyment. And so it's amazing to see how it also influences the movement in your artwork. It's just outside of the vibrancy, there's just so much intertwinement with how body and nature comes together to make this composition that you establish in various positions, and these worlds that you build with people and nature in movement, everything in movement. So that's really awesome.
Thanks. Yeah.
And so let's talk a bit about your studio practice. How did your MFA aid in establishing what is your studio practice today? If it did, if it didn't, tell us.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a complicated question. I think
Yeah.
on a material level, having a studio
Mm-hmm.
period is
Mm-hmm.
really pivotal in creating a studio practice.
Yeah.
Like when I was in my MFA, I had a space there. I could, make as much of a mess as I wanted to without damaging, the school's property.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, there is where I kind of honed my skills and done the experiments to where now I can make the work that I make pretty easily and pretty systematically.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Um, so in that regard, having the studio space in the MFA program was very important. On the other hand, I felt a lot of the time like I wanted to hide my studio, like I didn't want to open my studio like for critique, from
Mm-hmm.
the general public of the school. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there were certain people I invited to talk with me about my work, but
Yeah.
I felt like I had to be very protective of that space because
Mm-hmm.
I saw people get derailed. Like saw people
Oh wow.
in like like working on something that might have been really interesting and having like teachers and students kind of like pick up the wrong thing that was interesting about their work, and like then that artist like start focus on that thing, and then it becomes like less interesting, at least to me. and i
Yeah.
and I was cognizant of that and decided that I did not want that to happen to me, and I was very protective.
Mm-hmm.
um, I was very protective of that space so that that type of thing wouldn't happen to me. So yeah, I mean, MFA is a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting that you describe that, because I think I have a similar experience in being guarded about who I invited into my space. I mean, going through the program, there were a few people that were regular visitors, and there was others that I just had no interest because, just like you said, you wanted to make sure that you weren't derailed, and you wanted to keep a certain focus, and you had a certain assurance, so I'm sure, of what was and wasn't your work. And
Hmm.
having that be encouraged was most important, through growth, but also keeping that foundation of what you found aesthetically appealing, but then also conceptually appealing. So yeah, I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, the word that comes to mind is just keeping it authentic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a part of the challenge of getting an MFA, because you have this vision and you have this idea that you want to flesh out. And sometimes certain opinions or critiques aren't as helpful in really expanding on that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in grad school, in the MFA program, you almost have to have a level of discernment on, as far as like what critiques or what advice you are going to get, or that fit within the realm of the idea that you're trying to bring out, and then other opinions or critiques that you kind of just have to throw away. And that's even a process to work through within the program.
Yeah.
And the thing too in the MFA space is like you're supposed to be expanding your horizons. You're supposed to be absorbing and offering, all kinds of information to yourself and the cohort of people around you. So it can get very muddy about
Mm-hmm.
who exactly is, you know, friend and co-conspirator and
Mm-hmm.
um, help in that space.
Yeah.
Do you think by being a person of color, it could kind of complicate that process of discernment and trying to expand your ideas when sometimes you may not be surrounded by people that understand your cultural background?
That's complicated too because if you have a clear idea of like what you want to pull from in regards to your culture, then it kind of doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what whether or not the people around you have the same reference point. It
Mm-hmm.
just like from there it becomes about clarity, it becomes about play, it becomes about improvisation, and it on the opposite side it becomes about like planning and organization and concision as an
Mm-hmm.
artist. And in an MFA program, those things are often, pulled in and pushed out super easily. So, and
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is like 1 week you can be in a critique and you can have a very specific project that you've been working on that has like specific cultural or even historical and material conditions, historical, not historical reality and material conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Or on the other hand, you could have like something that is super muddy and like you're just interested in like a material and playing with the material. And like how does one's cohort identify one from the other?
Mm-hmm.
I think is the issue oftentimes when it comes to students of color. Like you could be you could be making shit from like bark or whatever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then because you're black, people will come and start talking to you about, you know, you could be thinking about climate change, blah blah blah, or and motherfuckers will start talking to you about how hard it is to be black. Like I don't know, you know what I mean? Like so it's
Yeah.
like the problem is that like people try too hard to meet black or students of color in the cultural slash self-referential space.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes, and I mean, there's have you guys seen The African Desperate?
No.
So
No.
there's this artist Martine Sims who made a film. Well, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, just about like you know this student that was in an MFA program at Bard College, and the whole first part of the film is like her final critique, and it's just like a really ridiculous group of white people like asking her all these like cultural questions and then like business industry questions and saying things that don't make any sense.
It,
And it was like such a great example of how people often fumble the cultural element of black artists' work
yeah.
while also like completely ignoring all the interesting and playful like conceptual and material things that we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
um
We need to watch this, Marlon.
yeah, you guys
Yes.
have to
Maybe
throw
watch
it.
this together and actually
Yeah,
comment on it.
it's so
Yes.
good.
Future
um
episode.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so it's more complicated than motherfuckers are racist. It
Yeah.
comes down actually to like how rigorous are people willing to be with you as a black artist, which I guess
Mm-hmm.
comes into a
Mm-hmm.
racial space,
Yeah.
as far as like what they're willing to offer you as far as help,
Yeah.
and also like how available are they to, what you might be doing in the studio, you know, and that also presupposes that everything that you're doing is interesting or creative, right? It's like I've seen a lot of like black artists in critiques and in other spaces make very lazy, like boring things, and people like laud and praise it because it's so clearly about the struggle of black people.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that also speaks to like how, and you can, I said black artists, but you could talk about black writers, black,
Yeah. Yeah.
any kind of black culture producer. Like if it's almost like if it's specific enough about the universal struggle of, you know, people of color in the world against white supremacy and capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
form and form and play and creative um, rigor be damned, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So in a
Mm-hmm.
world like that, how do you move the needle forward? How do you push the narrative? How do you push the narratives forward? How do you push the creative rigor forward, not just for yourself, but like for future generations looking things up?
Yeah.
These are big questions. I don't really know the answer, but I do recognize that there's a lot of stuff going on that takes me aback, that I'm like, huh,
Mm.
that's interesting.
Right.
you
Yeah.
Right.
know, and like, who's complicit in this and who's a co-conspirator in this,
Right.
you know. And I mean that in negative ways, but I also mean that in positive ways. There's stuff that I've seen that I was like, whoa, there's no way in hell that I thought that would get produced with money, but I've
Yeah.
seen it get produced. So like somebody like the African Desperate is a scathing indictment of like the MFA industrial complex. And
Yeah.
like Bridget Donahue is in it. You know what I mean? So like what does that even, how do we even, and Bridget Donahue's a big New York gallerist who's been around for
Mm-hmm.
a long time. It's just like, how do you even get someone like that to participate in this kind of critique,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
industry wide critique? Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of like what I think about that.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's really some insightful thoughts and curiosities around what what that could be. Very, very interesting. And I, it kind of makes me think like as you were developing your practice then, like like were how were you finding models for what that would then look like for you as you're navigating these spaces, your artist
Digging deep,
practice?
man. Like referencing stuff outside of art, reading,
Mm-hmm.
reading a lot of fiction, reading a lot of poetry,
Mm-hmm.
um, talking to people, you know, talking to people who aren't art like visual artists. I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of the time we get very bogged down in, the minutia of our own industry.
Yeah.
And really, we like art in the past 100 years has been so self-referential,
Mm-hmm.
it's especially in like white art spaces, that it can get a little boring, it can get a little stale,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really important, I feel like, to as an artist to, expand your horizons, learn how to play a sport, have community outside of art, like have a hobby, you know
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
be a real person.
Be a real person.
Yeah, be a
I
real
love that.
person, like, is that important, because
Yeah.
otherwise you just end up making art about art, and I mean, that's, for me, that's not that interesting.
Yeah. That's yeah. And so like what does like your a regular week schedule looks like for you now, and has that been modeled after, and working artists that you found inspiration from as you were building your practice?
I think, well, I have a job, so I like work a couple days, um, like outside of the studio,
Mm-hmm.
so like now I'm like I have to like really squeeze the studio in into my
Mm-hmm.
week. But mostly I just work from 12 to 6 when I am not at my other job, and
Mm-hmm.
I try to have a hard line about that and not working past that or starting before that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I treat it like a job. Like when I'm not actually putting pen to paper, I'm writing notes, I'm listening to things. I'm always working, but I also try to make sure that it's not something that takes over my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah, like I have a pretty healthy distance from it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I think when I didn't have a second job, I was going crazy, just trying to make stuff to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I don't. I think the peace has come from not having that pressure.
Mm. That's can be very relieving, I'm sure.
So what was that like? Because it sounds like there was a period of your life where you were in a pure sense a working artist, like what the all in 10 toes down as a working artist. So how long was that period, and what was that like for you overall?
I've done it for a long time. I think this is like my first job I've had in like 5 years.
Okay.
So I think the business of art is really fraught and complicated right now, especially because of the ways that like payment structures and how galleries and institutions work. So I had a lot of problems just generally with like, you know, making what was on paper make sense with what I had in my bank account.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
like, you get you used to do a project, you're supposed to get $10,000, and they've broken it up into three, and you got to wait 60 days for each part. And it's like, actually, I'm not being paid. Like,
Right.
I'm not actually being paid.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Like, I have been working on a project for 3 months and I have only received $4,000. Now, how
Mm.
am I supposed to pay rent and do the project and feed myself and be able to go out to the club on a Saturday night?
Yeah. Yeah.
How am I supposed to
Yeah.
do all of that with this money?
Yeah.
You know? And for a long time, I, I would supplement just by like, selling prints and like DJing and all the shit. And, that will burn you out. Like
Mm.
just being like constantly on and like constantly being available for work will burn you
Mm-hmm.
out. And I found myself earlier this year being like, you know what, I'm not gonna do this anymore. Like I'm not
Mm.
gonna like spend every waking hour of my life like applying to grants, or like taking every single project that people offer to me just because like, it's gonna pay the rent.
Mm-hmm.
N-
Mm.
Next, in 3 months it'll pay the rent, because it's not
Yeah.
gonna pay your rent next month. You need to have had that money already in. That's the issue. Like if I mean, I guess your listeners or people who are thinking about MFAs, like, try to, I mean, some of you are more savvy than I am, I'm sure, but, try to think of this business as like a savings business. Like you really have to have lots of money up front
Mm-hmm.
while you know, while you work on the projects that you're working on,
Mm.
and make sure that you spend like, I don't know, half your budget. Like, don't ever spend your whole budget on a project.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like the little practical things like that
Yeah.
of being like, yeah, if they offer you less money, do half the work. Like just stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out a way to like how to do that without even having a conversation. Like, don't ask for more. Like if the budget is what it is and you know what your bills are, figure out a way to like make the thing for half the money and like save the money that you would have used for production, like that kind of thing. I don't know. It's difficult.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think that's
yeah.
important to state and to recognize that it's a matter of really knowing your worth and understanding that your time is also valuable too. So really just practically talking about like what does this look like in a real life in practice sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate you saying, that is a part of your negotiating a little bit, or how you handle your business of your artwork, and essentially that is an aspect of how you price your work as well. That's a part of that equation, as far as, okay, if this is the budget, this is as much as I will put into the work, or this is the
Right.
level of work that is going to be produced with this amount of budget. I think that's very important
Yeah.
to stay, because a lot of, especially a lot of up and coming artists or aspiring artists, that's kind of like a process that they kind of have to navigate through and kind of learn how to develop, and figure out what does this look like in a practical sense. So I think that's very important, as far as even when you are negotiating or even when you are doing work, there are boundaries that need to be set in order for this to be a fair business transaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
and I'm still learning how to do that, right? Like I don't have the answers. I kind of learned the hard way that you need to pay attention to what opportunities are being offered to you, and being very cautious and very rigorous about doing research about who you're working with,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And like I know, like I've seen a lot of people and experienced myself a lot of just like weird shady shit, and like bad interactions that will ruin your budget. Like you think you're going to get certain money, and then like you're waiting forever to receive it, or on like a commercial gallery sense, like you have a gallerist who's like super gung-ho about your work, really excited about it, interested in working with you, and they think they can sell a bunch of your work. You offer them some stuff and then they can't sell it, and then it's just sitting in their storage,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
And like that kind of thing can really derail, the year. It could derail the year. It could derail what you want from your studio.
Mm-hmm.
It could make it harder to make new work, just so. Yeah, like for young artists, I'm like, make sure you have clear consignment agreements. And, there are things like 6 months to a year consignment agreements that galleries will ask from you that I think are wrong.
Mm.
I think that 90 days is the longest time a gallerist should have your work, unless you're represented by them and you
Mm-hmm.
know that your work is going to be safely stored and that it's always going to be on a PDF for sale. And, it's really customary for gallerists who do group shows to just have work from people, and I think that, that could really be detrimental to someone's practice, just because you want to be able to make new stuff. If you have a year worth of artwork like sitting on someone's PDF, unable to be sold, like where's the production money for new things going to come from?
Yeah.
So just on a practical level, like protecting yourself, and these are issues that can be solved by simply an artist union.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's like, hey, like if every artist started a union, then a 90-day consignment agreement could be something that would really help getting artists work back, and like also groups of artists holding galleries accountable. Like, hey, like if I'm an artist that's about to have a show at your gallery, my union should be able to let me know whether or not the gallery has returned past artists' work, has kept, fair sales records and fair payment timelines.
Mm.
Otherwise, that gallery shouldn't be able to like show new work. Like you should be paused if you don't, treat your artists
Produce.
right.
In
Yeah.
sales, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like you should not be able to be like, and granted, like I know that all shows don't sell out.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But like, you know, the fair thing to do when you're splitting 50-50 is to understand that, you know, if I fail at producing work that sells and you fail at selling it, we should share that failure. You know, it shouldn't be a
Right.
situation where, you know, you get to you, regardless of whether or not I am whatever successful, you put on shows whenever you want to put on shows from whoever, while
Mm-hmm.
I have to, you know, go back to the drawing board for a year, you know, up to a year to make new work without the resources that I thought I had from working with you,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
gung ho gallerist, you know. So I mean, you know, stuff like that. That's, you know, these are things that I want to see in the art world. But ultimately, you know, it comes down to just you being savvy and rigorous about who you work with. Because there are good
Yeah.
galleries out there, there are bad galleries out there, and it's not easy to discern from, you know, who from who,
Yeah.
but it is possible, you know.
Yes.
And that looks like talking to people, asking them how their gallery experiences are. Not a lot, you know, some artists, especially some artists that are super successful, not going to really tell you.
Mm.
But, you know, I mean, at least in my experience, I've had people be very hush hush about stuff because if it's working, people don't want to break it. They don't want they don't want it to get back to anybody that you talking shit, you know, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But in reality, we need to start having these conversations out in the open because, you know, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of artists that are your faves that suffer in silence, you know, be broke and unable, you know,
Wow.
losing their studio and stuff
Yeah.
because of like stuff like this. You know, I mean, the like Jeffrey Gibson is fine, but like, you know, he's suing his gallery in Chicago for $600,000 from, you
Yeah.
know, unpaid sales, you know, like
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
destroy a younger artist,
Yeah.
Right.
you know, like that would, you would never be able to make art again when you have over $500,000 of unpaid sales. And the
Yeah.
reason I think he's able to do that now is because he, you know, he's supported and he has a gallery in New York and he's just got the Venice Biennial,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like he's got an influx of money coming in that's going to allow him to make what he needs to make. But $600,000 on the table just off of like a relationship with a gallery who's not treating you right is crazy. That's out of
Yeah.
this world. Yeah. I've been talking for
Mm-hmm.
a long time, but that's, you know, it is what it is.
But you were dropping
No, I mean,
gems.
it's really good. Seriously, like, how would people know? People don't know. People don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know until you're in it.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're speaking to the other side of art, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're even saying things that I didn't necessarily know that I should look out for, didn't realize, and didn't think could be, you know, a possible option for me. So in particular, as far as that relationship between the gallerist and the artist, right? Especially for those galleries that you're working with that you're not represented by, because that's the nuanced aspect of the art industry is that, let's say, unlike, you know, the music industry where you're under maybe one label, in art you can have representation or you can work with a number of galleries.
And those relationships can be very different, and you know,
Exactly.
navigating what that means for each relationship, and then what happens if a relationship goes sour, you know. So
Yes.
it's a lot that you would not know unless you are tapped into a community of other artists that are in that space of, you know, managing those experiences. And yeah, I remember seeing that article come out and was shocked that that was happening to, you know, such established artists. But you know, it's these things are not all that rare. We just don't always hear about what's happening on the other side of the curtain.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you do a lot of self-promotion of your work. And I know that social media is a huge part of how you are independently selling your pieces. please tell me how you strategize in using this and which platforms you use and why so.
Um, so I try to have it integrated into just like my normal life. Like it's not
Mm.
really I don't have like a super robust social media strategy. I wish I did. I wish I was more internet savvy in a like a practical way. I mean, I've used it for a long time, so I know how to just like make nice pictures and talk about shit to people, and
Mm-hmm.
like I know how to like utilize memes and stuff, but like
Yeah.
I definitely know that I could have a more polished social media presence that might make me more visible to like galleries and collectors and blah blah blah. I think for a moment during the pandemic, like during lockdown,
Yeah.
people were just like a much more receptive to like seeing work online, and
Yeah.
that has changed since we've come
Yeah.
out of lockdown, just because there's so many opportunities to see art in person and there's
Right.
so many
Mm.
new artists.
True.
So for me, what I've been doing has just been like going back to the drawing board, as far as like not going back to the drawing board, but like going back to old techniques, right? Like doing zine fairs, showing up at like performances and stuff like that. Just being in community with other artists, at least being in community with artists that I want to be around, and going to see stuff that I want to see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you have to kind of put in the face time so that people remember that you are around and exist and like want to work with you. You
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard to do. I mean, if you're not feeling confident in what you're making,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to just post what you're doing and hope that people will see it and resonate. But like the algorithm now, especially on Instagram, is not really built for that, especially if you're not legitimized in the way that Meta wants you to legitimize as an artist. Like
Mm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
selling,
Talk about that.
like I mean, there's certain types of posts. There's like times for posting. There's certain relationships that, you know, as an artist, like there's certain followers and following that you should have that
Mm-hmm.
will, high engagement accounts that will help to get your work seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like having pictures with people that have that, having people own and tag your work that have that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really important. Um, but that's if you're living life like a normal person, that's kind of hard to do in like a concerted way. Like
Truth. Yeah.
like if you have a friend that has 100,000 followers, you can't just like it's weird to be like, hey, post my shit. But maybe it's not. I don't know. I guess there's some. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like there's certain people that are down to do shit like that, but I feel like in the art world, it's a little bit less it's a little bit
Yeah.
less directed in that way. So
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Instagram is really one of those things that this algorithm
They got it down to
processes.
a science.
Yeah.
They be changing it up so frequently too. As soon as you think you learned it, you don't know it no more.
Yeah. And honestly, Instagram has a lot of control over like your visibility on the platform.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like if Meta agrees with your posts and think you're cool, they will boost you. If they
Mm,
don't, like they will shadow ban you. That happens,
mm,
you know. Um,
mm-hmm.
so, you know,
Yeah.
it's you have to be cognizant, I guess, of that. And then also like certain kinds of artwork do better on Instagram than others. Like if you make things that are super pop colorful, fits into the aspect ratio of the standard aspect ratios that Instagram uses,
Mm-hmm.
like then you're more likely to get a lot of engagement because of that. If you make things that are like, what's that guy's name? His last name is Ryman, I think. Michael Ryman? Robert Ryman? he makes these like white grid paintings,
Hmm. Okay.
like all white paintings, like if you make some shit like that and there's not really high contrast,
Yeah.
then you're probably going to get less engagement, even if it's like in person, super visceral and like
Yeah.
meditative and blah blah blah, like have all these qualities to it.
Right.
If it's not capturable on a camera, then your art will get lost in the algorithm
Mm-hmm.
because
That's
it's really
true.
just about that pop. It's about having something that photographs well, not necessarily something that is a great artwork
Yeah,
per se.
that's true. And you've built a lot of relationships with both institutions, museums, commercial spaces. Like, how did you develop that? Was it through the use of social media or otherwise?
No, I mean I've been in New York for been in the New York art world for like 10 years. So
Mm-hmm.
just like being out, I used to serve drinks like at gallery openings, like like shit like that. Like
Yeah, I didn't know that you used to do that.
Okay.
yeah, I mean I intern places. I mean treated horribly exploited, you
Yeah.
know. And those relationships are still fraught now. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like I'm not gonna say I would not advise you to go intern at a gallery. That's dumb. Like intern at like a agency somewhere where you could actually get some work experience. Because
Mm.
no shade. Actually shade. Fuck it. Um that's not a real job. Like you can be like a New York girl, like girly, like a downtown cool girl just from off of Instagram. Like don't go intern at no gallery. Like like don't do that. That's dumb.
I will say that in my early years, I did try to do an internship at a gallery, and I was just left so confused and befuddled, and I got I really didn't get anything out of it. But I'm glad. I guess in hindsight, I'm glad that I got that experience to get that understanding. But also in hindsight, kind of waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, as an artist, right? Like if you're a
Yes.
curator, somebody like that, or an art administrator, like clearly like understanding how the business of art works
Yeah.
is paramount to your success. But
Yeah.
like as an artist, like it's really silly it's a really silly thing to spend your
Yeah.
time doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's really nothing for you to there's nothing creative being done on the gallery level. It's all
Mm.
PR and
Mm.
marketing
Mm.
Yeah.
and sales,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. And how do you then, I guess, keep these relationships over the years? Are you like checking in with people, shooting an email or a text here and there? Like how do you continue to develop the relationships that were good that you chose to keep?
Yeah.
well, it's hard, it's hard to I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm at a place where like the relationships that have been super fruitful for me, like the opportunities that have presented themselves have been kind of like quiet recently. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that's because, those people are less successful than they were or because, there are other people they want to support.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not like taking that personally. It's just like you should be building relationships with new people all the time
Yeah.
and just expanding your network outward. You know, like people are mostly trying to help you. Like I feel like very few people are trying to hurt you. So the more people you know, the better. Even, I mean, clearly the more people you know who are a fan of you are the
Mm-hmm.
better.
Right.
Like,
Right.
but yeah, like I mean, I hate the advice of like go to openings because that's dumb. But like, talk to other artists and like
Khari is telling it like it is.
I'm sorry.
Because you know what's really funny though? Like these are things that are advised to us or encouraged to us in grad school as far as like connecting with the art gallery and then you find yourself interning as an artist and you're like, what am I doing here? Openings, right? You have a lot of people saying, go to all these openings and make sure your face is in every place and and all these things. So now you're kind of, I wouldn't say you're kind of pushing against that, and I think that needs to be heard.
I don't think you should go to openings to like quote unquote meet people for your own career. I think you
Right.
should go and support artwork that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's
Mm-hmm.
an artist
Mm,
doing a show that you really love, go and
Yeah.
be a fan there because that's important.
Yeah.
You
yes.
know, for the
Yes.
artist who is showing.
Right.
And if that happens to produce a relationship with a gallerist who is also a fan of you,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a fruitful, experience.
Mm-hmm.
But like, showing up at everything just to be there so that people know who you are is silly because that presupposes that. I mean, it just presupposes that the people that are at that space are going to like you and are going
Yeah.
to be interested in your artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be interested, you might be going to shit that where those people would never be interested in your work. Um,
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
and like that's just reality, right? Like it's like not everything is for everybody, and not every artwork is going to resonate with every gallerist. So
Yeah.
just because you showed up doesn't mean those people are going to show up for you,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't you shouldn't conceptualize it as a transaction in that way because
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm,
not. It's really it's a misnaming to think of it that way.
Yeah. 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 I think the reframing that you gave feels so authentic because, grad school will, have you thinking that you just need to be at every single thing
you need
that's
to be
happening on the
out.
schedule.
You need to be out and about.
But I mean, quite honestly, I've always been a person that I go where I feel like I want to support the person or the people showing.
Right.
And because I don't want to be in a space just kind of looking at the walls and I have no interest and I'm just, I
Drinking
look
and
like
talking.
drinking and talking. Like the whole point is to really be taking in the work too and supporting the artists
Yes.
that made the work. So like it is quite inauthentic to just be at every single thing, even if you really don't even feel like being there.
And I want to echo a comment that one of our past guests said, and that is every space is not for everybody, right? And not in a sense of a lack, but also understanding it was more so an introspective, from an introspective perspective of there are some spaces you just don't need to be at that will not feed you or fuel you. The people there, the particular people there are probably not the people that you need to be in front of or that you need to give your energy to. So being very mindful of the spaces that you are in and the spaces that you decide to insert yourself in. So I think that what you're saying mirrors that, or goes along with that in saying that, yes, you don't need to be at every opening. You don't need to be at every function, because if you're going there to try to network, the people that are there are probably not the people that are interested in really networking with you. So
I mean, it could be, but like if that is like if networking is the goal,
Yeah.
you have to be very savvy about like how you utilize that. Like
that
Yeah.
time, yeah.
I yeah, like I feel like that it can get very like extra and vapid, and like you can end up just partying. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
Yeah.
like yeah, like
Becoming a socialite instead of being an artist, which is which was your original intent. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm trying to be clear, and I'm trying not to be flippant about it, because I
Yeah.
do think that people do get a lot of attention from just being in New York and like being in the art world.
Yeah.
But like you have to be contributing something, and people have to recognize that. And if they
Mm-hmm.
don't, just simply being present doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Must be
So
thoughtful.
you have to be thoughtful, and also you have to be able to like read the room.
Yeah.
Like, do these people give a fuck about me? And if you can't tell, that probably means they don't give a fuck
Right.
about you. You know? So
Right. Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
that's truth. That's truth. So I kind of want to veer a little bit because we're essentially talking about community, right? And one thing, and I want to go back to the MFA program and the MFA experience, is you kind of have your community kind of organized for you. So in the sense of critiques, those are very organized, and that's a part of that community, right? But when you
Structure.
graduate, the structure, thank you. But when you graduate, you don't have that structure anymore. So what's the role of critique in your studio practice? What does that look like now, post MFA?
Really difficult to I mean, you can ask people to come to your studio, that's like a thing,
Mm-hmm.
but you just have to work with other people's schedules. I think when you're, to serendipitously have a studio visit with someone while you're in MFA, it's like super easy, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're all there,
Yeah.
um, like that kind of thing. Like you're all physically in the space. Like you can you can just simply ask, like, "Hey, you want to come to my studio right now?"
Yeah.
Um, whereas like once you come, you're not once you're outside of that, then it gets a little bit more complicated. But I think that's also why people like really prioritize getting studio spaces in like the sharp lentes, like those kinds of things,
Yeah.
because like they kind of mimic the MFA building,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
studio
Mm.
building. Like you have people around you, and like usually people try to like get studios in studio buildings with artists they admire. So you can be strategic about it,
Mm-hmm.
or you can just try to keep the people that have been useful in like a critique sense to your
So
practice
what are
around.
some of the things that you do, or what are some ways that you can access critique for you in your practice?
I mean, I'm on the phone with friends all the time talking about the work that I'm making.
Mm-hmm.
I also, you know, like I have a lot of, like I said before, I have a lot of friends that are not visual artists, that are writers, that are dancers. Just like going to and engaging with their work is
Yeah.
Okay.
often um, a space where I find that is generative for me. I don't necessarily know if critique in the way that the MFA offers it is something that I find fruitful, mostly
Mm-hmm.
because like I don't know. I'm not I'm not I don't know. I'm not that interested in talking about my own shit that much. Um, but yeah, like I have like a specific thing that I might want to do, that I might have a specific question about, but like in overall, what's happening, what am I doing conversation with somebody is really not that interesting. Um,
Mm.
I don't know if that's a gem. I think that might be just my own bullshit. I think I might have to get over that, but I'm not sure. Right now, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I would even say that's how you've been for quite some time because knowing you for as long as I've known you, from when we shared studio space, you always kind of really didn't care what anyone had to say about what you were making. And I admired that because I feel like back then I was a little bit more eager to know if I quote unquote was doing it right. And I think I only got a bit of your I really don't care what anyone says since I got to grad school and started to hear what
Yeah,
people
because
were saying.
I was gonna say, Chris, that I don't know you to
You
be that
don't know that
eager.
part of
I
me.
didn't I didn't get that, Chris. I haven't experienced that, Chris. I don't know that, Chris.
Right. I mean, and the thing is,
Yeah.
like, if you have specific questions about your work,
Mm-hmm.
then then it can be very fruitful to have studio visits with people, and
Exactly.
like have like critiques with people.
Mm-hmm.
If it's like, okay, I'm working on this project and I have this historical or poetic context, you're an expert in that. Let's have a
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
conversation. It's different than being like, okay, you're another artist. Tell me whether or not I'm doing good. And
Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
that, to me, that is not. useful or helpful or interesting, mostly because people can't get into your mind about what you're trying to do.
Exactly. I think what anything I think I learned from you is, yeah, like you just said, ask better questions, and you ask more specific questions that is getting to the heart of what you're really trying to do. That's when it really becomes useful growth for you. So yeah, I think, yeah, I could definitely see how that is much more useful to your practice now in terms of just having conversations and being inspired when you're
Yeah.
working.
And I think you also have to be curious. Like, I think the reason why I'm going back and forth on this is because I do also believe that you have to be curious about your own work. Like,
Yeah.
you can't just like take it as like on face value, because I feel like that's how
Mm-hmm.
you end up just making the same shit all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, talking to other artists about your work might be less fruitful because they're thinking about their own work. So they might just
Mm-hmm.
be making your shit more like their shit,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm.
So that's why I feel like the emphasis should be on talking to people outside of your discipline. Like if you have friends that are scientists or
Mm-hmm.
friends that are, you know, that can like critically engage with different things, but also coming to what you're doing from a different perspective,
Yeah.
that might be the most useful thing to try and get as far as critique.
Truth. Yeah.
Like
That
what are
makes a
normal
lot of
people
sense.
seeing, or what are,
Exactly.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I like thinking about then how you are balancing the making of work. How are you then? I know you do a lot of painting. I know you use some like real nice pigments. How how do you like manage the budget of like supplies and then your then personal needs when it comes to like your finances around like maybe health and so forth?
oh, it's so hard. I don't know. I don't have like, I'm not successful at that at all. I'm not.
Mm,
I don't have advice for that. Like,
okay.
yeah, no. I'm not a successful example of that. I struggle
Mhm.
deeply to budget
Mhm.
my supplies, often just because art supplies are so expensive, and
It
when
is.
you want to make the work that you want to make, you're going to spend whatever it costs to get the supplies for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not like a fabricator in the way that like I know some other artists are who can like find shit on the street and turn it into artwork. I'm like not that person.
Mhm.
Like so yeah, I don't. I'm not like a recycler for
Mhm.
sure. So I don't really know. I think I try to make sure that I have the money in the bank account when I go to the store,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and to only buy what I can afford at any given moment. And I try to make artwork at a price point that will allow me to go back to the store and have enough money
Mhm.
in the account to to buy more supplies.
Yes.
But
Mm.
that's really kind of it. Like I don't know.
Mhm. I think that's good advice though. Keep it within budget,
Keep
whatever
it
that
within
budget looks
budget.
like. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then also doing research to establish your budget, right? Because
At least
for
a
you,
general understanding.
general understanding, yeah, because I mean, if you are also considering in your budget to be able to afford to go back to get more supplies, there's a little bit of planning involved with that. And an understanding, like you said, Chris, of how much things cost to account for those times when you, in the middle of a project, may run out of uh, materials from your first run to the store.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that's very important. But also just to continue with budgeting or continue with finances and just your overall well being. Like, what does healthcare needs look like for you?
Oh my God. I mean, luckily, okay, so a couple of years ago, I had a solo and I made a lot of money and, whatever, set myself up. And I had health insurance. Like last year, I got this fucking parasite. That shit was crazy. It took me 4 months to like get rid of it and like
Mm.
completely clear of it. Luckily, I bought health insurance and was like paying for it. so I could like go to see different doctors and
Mm-hmm.
get medication and stuff. But it's really difficult as an artist to have adequate health care. Um, Another thing that I feel like a union could, address. I mean, you know, the AGEA, which is like graphic artist union, design union. I know there's a graphic artist guild. There's like freelancers guild. They all have health insurance that you
Mm-hmm.
can
Mm.
purchase.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that us visual artists haven't banded together to ensure that all of us get to have insurance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
True.
like
That's true.
there's so many artists, there's so many creative industries where we like they don't have this problem of like how
How
to
am I gonna pay my doctor
yeah,
bills? How am I
yeah,
gonna get this
you know
medicine?
yeah. And I really think that it's just because we don't think of the fine art industry as an industry. We think of our individual careers and the like magic of our individual studio practices,
Mm-hmm.
and we think that there are artists that are really good artists who deserve healthcare, and there are really bad artists who suck and need to go back to the drawing board until they can make enough money to buy their own healthcare. And I feel like that's
Mm.
very silly and dumb. Like I really think
Yeah.
that we should figure out a way to come together to like provide that care for each other.
Yeah.
It's not difficult
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's fair. But to
because right
end,
now,
oh,
sorry.
sorry. No, go ahead.
Yeah, because right now I'm on fucking Medicaid, so or Medicare, whatever, whichever one is for poor people.
Yeah. We are all about, taking and accessing the aid that is necessary at whatever, point you are in your life. So we've definitely done some research and shared some resources to our listeners to that. So no shade on that for sure. And as we close out, I'd love to hear about, a little bit more about your pursuits of what you're doing in your day to relax and take time for yourself that is creative or nourishing. I know at some point you were like big into baking and cooking, and I'm curious what that is for you now. That is labor that you're doing for yourself and not for the economy.
I mean, I've been just I mean, I dance on a regular basis. I take class when I'm not at work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I practice when I'm not at work. I'm pretty into dancing on a regular basis right now.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
do it. Yeah, I try to go to the gym 4 times a week. I just moved, so I'm a little behind in that. I haven't done it as consistently as I normally want to, but I will get back into it at some point. So the gym, the dance studio. I also like to cook and bake. Yeah, but I feel like I want to do that more when I have guests.
What's your favorite thing to break? I'm interested. I'm curious.
Favorite thing
What's
to bake?
yeah?
I like to make like
What's a
this.
Kyrie staple?
Well, if I'm feeling like I want to offer something to a group of people, oftentimes it's going to be like a blood orange olive oil cake with like semolina flour
Okay,
and almond
wait,
flour,
wait.
something like light and cute,
All
you
right,
know.
I'll take a blood
I'll
orange little cake.
That's kind of like one of my favorite things to make. I also really like to like fry fish. Like if I have people over, like I'll fry skate wings or catfish for people.
Catfish. Now you're
You know,
speaking my language.
yeah.
Yes.
I like to make several different types of stew. I like to cook. I'm a pretty good cook.
He
I think.
is. He has fed me. And I have a high chest. So if Kyrie
Yeah.
feeds me, it's good.
All right, so I'm gonna have to make my way over to New York and uh try some of Kari's blood orange cake and catfish and stews.
Come eat real good.
I love
You
it.
know,
I love
that's how
it.
you stay healthy too, eating well. keep you from the doctor, getting your macronutrients in on a daily basis, keeping the
Yes.
sugar and the salt low,
Mm-hmm.
all of that.
Love it, love it. Well, thank you again, Kyrie, for taking out the time to talk to us and really give us the real of what it means to be an artist. You dropped some gems, you put things in different perspectives, and you articulated and showed other facets of what it means to be an artist that really isn't talked about as much as it should be. So thank you so much for that. But to close out, we wanna give you a little bit more of the spotlight and a little bit more of the center stage, and let you tell us how we can follow you, or how our listeners can follow you. What's your Instagram? Do you have a website? Let us know.
Any shows that's coming?
Yes.
I don't have anything to announce right now,
Okay.
but I am on the internet at Khari.studio on Instagram and made by Khari on like the generalized internet. Actually, like I'm gonna be doing I'm gonna be tabling at the Brooklyn Museum's Sunday Zine Fair because
Okay.
they just opened a show about artist zines um, over the past modern history or whatever. That should
Yeah.
be really cool.
Awesome.
So I'll be there sharing like the entire arc of my zine making practice.
Mm. I have some of those deans. They're
Yeah,
beautiful.
thanks. Yeah, so most of them I will have almost every zine I've made with me um,
Wow.
for people
Awesome.
to peruse. Yeah,
Awesome.
Wonderful.
And do you have a website?
yeah, it's made by Carrie.com.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're definitely gonna check you out and follow you, and just thank you again, Kyrie, for everything, for your time.
Absolutely, no problem. It was a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Yes, lovely to have you.
All right, we're at that point again where we want to hear from you, the listeners. Join us on Discord, the link found in our show description, to share your thoughts on this question. For full-time working artists, how much does your art practice sustain your lifestyle?
Thank you for listening to our episode. The Hidden Critique is produced and hosted by us, Krystle and Lemonias and Marlon Tobias. Episodes are edited by Kirsten Pettifor. Original music composed by Cesar Presa.
If you like the show, you can review and rate this podcast via Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube page.
For exclusive bonus content, subscribe to our Patreon at The Hidden Critique.
Or join the Hidden Critiques Discord page to engage directly with us, the host, and build community with fellow listeners.